The question came without warning, live on BBC television, in front of 12 million viewers. Freddie Mercury sat under the blazing studio lights, his signature mustache perfectly groomed, his posture relaxed but alert. The interview had been going smoothly. Questions about sold-out stadiums, record-breaking albums, Queen's unstoppable rise to global dominance. Standard fare for a rock god at the absolute peak of his powers. Then the host leaned forward with that expression interviewers get when they think they're about to ask something profound, something personal, something that will make headlines. "Freddie," the host said, his voice dropping to that tone of false intimacy that British television perfected in the 1980s. "You have everything, the fame, the fortune, the adoration of millions, but I'm curious about something more, personal. Will you ever become a father? Have you thought about having a child of your own blood?" In the green room backstage, Brian May and Roger Taylor stopped their conversation mid-sentence. Both men turned toward the monitor, watching their friend's face on the screen. They knew Freddie well enough to recognize the subtle shift in his expression, the way his theatrical smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, the way his eyes focused on something far beyond the studio cameras. What happened in the next 3 minutes would change how millions understood what it meant to be a father, what it meant to leave a legacy, what it meant to love. But nobody watching that night, not the 12 million viewers, not the BBC crew, not even Freddie's closest friends, knew about the promise he was about to make. A promise that would remain secret for decades. Freddie took a deep breath. When he spoke, his voice was softer than usual, stripped of the theatrical flourishes that characterized his stage persona. This wasn't Freddie Mercury the performer. This was Farrokh Bulsara, speaking a truth he'd been carrying for years. "Biologically, I could have a child if I wanted to," Freddie began, each word carefully chosen. "But I've chosen not to. And please don't misunderstand this as selfishness. I know I can touch the lives of many children already in this world. My legacy shouldn't be property passed to someone who carries my name. It should be hope that touches millions of futures." He turned to look directly at the camera, speaking not to the host but to every person watching in their living rooms across Britain. "I may never have a biological child. But if there's a child somewhere who doesn't go to bed hungry tonight because of my support, if there's a child who can attend school because of what I can provide, then I am that child's father. I choose to make the entire world my family, not just one household. A true legacy isn't a child who carries your name. It's a heart that heals because of your name." The studio fell into complete silence. The host, a seasoned professional who had interviewed hundreds of celebrities, sat speechless. In homes across Britain, mothers reached for tissues. Fathers reconsidered what they'd taught their children about success. And in the green room, Brian May turned away from the monitor, his eyes wet with tears he didn't try to hide. What Freddie didn't reveal on that broadcast was the decision he'd already made 6 months earlier. 6 months before that BBC interview, Freddie had called a private meeting at his Kensington home Garden Lodge. Present were only his most trusted advisors, his manager Jim Beach, his accountant, and his lawyer. No press, no publicity, no one from Queen's record label. "I want to establish something," Freddie had told them, spreading documents across his dining room table. "But it must remain completely anonymous. Not one word of this reaches the press. Not one detail appears in any public record." His accountant had looked confused. "Freddie, what exactly are you proposing?" "A fund," Freddie replied, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "I want to create a permanent fund that will support children's hospitals, education programs, and medical research. But here's what's crucial. My name cannot be attached to it, not publicly. The fund will be called From a Nameless Friend. Every donation, every grant, every penny that flows from this fund must be untraceable back to me." Jim Beach, who had managed Queen's affairs for years, understood immediately what Freddie was attempting. "You want to give without recognition, without credit, without anyone knowing." "Exactly," Freddie confirmed. "If I do good works to make my name shine brighter, then it's not charity, it's commerce. When a father pays for his child's needs, does he announce it at a stadium? I'm going to be their distant father. Fatherhood is holding someone's hand when no one is watching." His lawyer raised a practical concern. Freddie, this will be a substantial portion of your personal wealth. Don't you want any acknowledgement, any tax benefits, any public record that this came from you? Freddie's answer would define everything he did for the rest of his life. Legacy isn't about people remembering who gave. It's about people remembering what was given. I don't need credit. I need children to have futures. The morning after the BBC interview aired, all of Britain was discussing Freddie Mercury's extraordinary statement. Newspapers ran headlines, "Rock star chooses world's children over own." Talk shows debated his philosophy. Some praised his generosity. Others questioned whether it was truly possible to be a father to strangers. But while the nation debated, Freddie was already implementing the promise he'd made on live television. He gathered his team at Garden Lodge again. The dining room table was covered with lists. Children's hospitals in desperate need of equipment, schools in impoverished areas requiring books and supplies, medical research programs seeking funding for pediatric diseases. Freddie's first instruction was specific and immediate. Find that children's hospital in East London, the one that's falling apart, where they're treating sick children with equipment from the 1950s. I want the most modern medical devices sent there. But on each piece of equipment, there will be only one note. The future shines in each of your eyes. Don't be afraid. Roger Taylor, who had arrived for what he thought was a regular band meeting, watched this scene unfold with growing amazement. "Fred," he asked quietly, "what exactly are you doing?" Freddie turned to his bandmate, his closest friend, his brother in all but blood. "I'm keeping a promise, darling. I told 12 million people last night that I would be a father to the world's children. I meant every word." Brian May, standing near the window overlooking Freddie's meticulously maintained garden, spoke without turning around. "We'll help you, Fred. Whatever you need. However long it takes. I know you will," Freddie replied, his voice thick with emotion, "because you're my family, and I need you to promise me something important. If someday this body can no longer carry this burden, promise me you'll continue caring for these children. I don't have biological heirs. My inheritance is you, and those innocent souls out there who need us." December 1985. While Queen dominated headlines with their triumph at Live Aid and plans for their upcoming Magic Tour, Freddie was orchestrating something entirely different, something secret, something that would bring tears to thousands of families who would never know his name. Freddie had purchased 5,000 toys, not cheap, mass-produced items, but quality toys, dolls with hand-stitched clothes, wooden trains carved with care, books with colorful illustrations, musical instruments sized for small hands. The total cost exceeded $100,000, more than most families in Britain would earn in a decade. But the money wasn't the extraordinary part. The extraordinary part was what Freddie did next. He spent 3 weeks writing personal notes, 5,000 individual messages, each one handwritten in his distinctive script, each one unique. His hand cramped. His back ached from hours bent over his desk. Jim Hutton begged him to at least hire someone to help with the writing. "No," Freddie insisted, massaging his sore wrist. "These children deserve personal words. They deserve to know that someone, somewhere, cares about them specifically, not as a group, not as a charity case, as individuals." Each note carried a different message, but all shared Freddie's core belief. Never stop dreaming. You are the most beautiful song this world will ever hear. Your smile is worth more than all the diamonds in the world. Never forget that. The future needs you. The world needs you. You matter. The toys were distributed to children's hospitals, orphanages, and poverty-stricken schools across Britain. No press releases, no photo opportunities, no Queen publicity team documenting the charitable work of their famous frontman. Just 5,000 toys appearing mysteriously in places where joy was a rare commodity, each one accompanied by a handwritten note from a friend who believes in you. Years later, a nurse at Great Ormond Street Hospital would tell a reporter, for 3 Christmases in the mid-1980s, boxes would arrive with no return address. Inside were these beautiful toys and the most moving handwritten notes. We never knew who sent them, but I watched terminally ill children clutch those notes like they were messages from angels. Some of those children kept those notes until the day they died. In 1987, Freddie's health was beginning to decline, though he told no one the true reason. He continued touring, recording, and maintaining the exhausting schedule that Queen's success demanded. But he also continued his secret work, the mission he'd promised to 12 million television viewers years earlier. One afternoon, Brian May arrived at Garden Lodge carrying a small envelope. Freddie was in his bedroom, resting after a particularly difficult week of treatments he'd told his bandmates were for exhaustion. "Fred," Brian said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed, "this came to my house today. I think you need to see it." Inside the envelope was a drawing. Created with crayons on cheap paper, it showed a massive sun. Inside the sun stood a figure holding a microphone, surrounded by smaller figures, children, all holding hands in a circle around him. At the bottom, in a child's careful handwriting, were 6 words that would reduce Freddie Mercury to tears. "Thank you, Father. I'm not afraid anymore." Freddie pressed the drawing to his chest, over his heart. Brian watched as his friend, this titan of rock music, this man who had commanded stadiums and conquered the world, wept like a child himself. "Do you see now?" Freddie whispered, his voice breaking. "This is what I meant. This child will never know my name, never see my face, never attend my concerts. But in their darkness, I was light. In their fear, I was courage. That's what a father does." Brian couldn't speak. He simply sat beside his friend, holding his hand, understanding finally and completely why Freddie had chosen this path. November 1991. Freddie knew he was dying. The disease that had ravaged his body was winning, and there wasn't much time left. He called Brian, Roger, and John Deacon to Garden Lodge for what would be their last private meeting as the 4 members of Queen. What they discussed that night would remain secret until Brian May revealed it in a 1995 interview, 4 years after Freddie's death. Freddie was weak, Brian recalled, his voice still heavy with emotion years later. He could barely sit up, but his mind was completely clear, and he had specific instructions for us. Freddie had gathered them to ensure his secret legacy would continue after his death. The anonymous fund he'd established years earlier had grown substantially. Freddie had been adding to it with every royalty check, every concert payment, every licensing deal. It now contained enough money to support children's programs for decades. "I need you to promise me something," Freddie told his bandmates that night, his voice weak but determined. "This fund continues. Every year more children are helped, but my name stays out of it, even after I'm gone, especially after I'm gone. I don't want my death to become a publicity opportunity. I want these children to receive help because they need it, not because it makes for good press about a dead rock star." Roger Taylor, usually the most pragmatic of the 4, broke down completely. "Fred, the world should know what you've done. You've helped thousands of children. You deserve recognition." Freddie smiled, that beautiful, warm smile that had captivated millions. "Darling, the recognition I need is in every child who grows up healthy because of this fund. That's the only credit I require. Promise me you'll keep this secret. Promise me the work continues quietly, the way real fathers work, without expecting applause." All 3 men promised, through tears, through heartbreak, through the devastating knowledge that they were losing their friend, they promised. Freddie Mercury died on November 24, 1991. The world mourned the loss of one of music's greatest performers. Tributes poured in from every corner of the globe. Stadium concerts were held in his honor. His music sales reached unprecedented heights. But in children's hospitals across Britain, something else was happening. Nurses noticed that the anonymous donations continued. The mysterious boxes of toys still arrived each Christmas. The fund that had been helping pediatric research kept growing, even though the man who created it was gone. True to their promise, Brian May, Roger Taylor, and John Deacon never revealed the full extent of Freddie's secret charity work. They established the Mercury Phoenix Trust in 1992, which became public and raised millions for AIDS research and awareness. But the original fund, from a nameless friend, remained exactly as Freddie had demanded: anonymous, secret, and focused solely on helping children. In 2001, a journalist investigating children's charity work in Britain discovered financial records showing that an unnamed source had donated over $2 million to children's causes between 1985 and 1991. The money had funded medical equipment, educational programs, and research into pediatric diseases. The journalist spent 2 years trying to trace the source, but every lead ended at legal walls and sealed records. The journalist finally approached Brian May with her findings. "I know this was Freddie," she said, presenting her evidence. "I just want confirmation. I want to tell his story. The world deserves to know how generous he was." Brian looked at the evidence, then looked at the journalist with an expression of profound sadness. "Even if I could confirm what you're suggesting," he said carefully, "I wouldn't. Because the person who created that fund, if such a person exists, did it specifically to help children, not to build a reputation, and I won't betray that intention, even to honor a friend." The story was never published. The fund remained anonymous. Freddie's wish was honored. Today, there are adults in their 40s and 50s who benefited from Freddie Mercury's secret generosity. They attended schools that received books and equipment from a nameless friend. They received medical treatment paid for by an anonymous donor. They opened Christmas presents accompanied by handwritten notes from someone who believed in them. Most of them never knew the notes were written by one of the most famous performers in the world. Most never connected the toys they received with the man singing Bohemian Rhapsody on their parents' radio. Most lived their entire lives never knowing that Freddie Mercury had been, in the most profound way possible, their distant father. And that's exactly how Freddie wanted it. In his final interview, given to a close friend just weeks before his death, Freddie reflected on his choice to remain childless and his decision to instead father thousands of children he would never meet. "People ask me if I regret not having biological children," Freddie said, his voice weak but clear. "But I don't see it that way. I chose to be a father to children who needed fathers. I chose to give my love to the entire world instead of just one child. And somewhere out there are children who are alive, healthy, and hopeful because of choices I made. That's fatherhood. That's legacy. That's immortality." The full extent of Freddie Mercury's secret charity work wasn't revealed until 2016, 25 years after his death, when legal restrictions on the sealed records finally expired. Researchers discovered that Freddie had donated over $3 million of his personal fortune to children's causes during his lifetime, equivalent to more than $10 million in today's currency. When Brian May was finally able to speak freely about Freddie's secret charity work in 2017, he said something that perfectly captured who Freddie Mercury really was. Freddie could have had his name on buildings. He could have had hospitals named after him. He could have used his charity work to build an even bigger legend. But he didn't want that. He wanted to help children, not to build monuments to himself. That's the difference between someone who does good for publicity and someone who does good because it's right. Freddie chose right, every single time. And he chose it in secret, which made it even more beautiful. The story of Freddie Mercury as a father is not the story of a man who raised biological children. It's the story of a man who chose a different kind of fatherhood, a secret fatherhood, a fatherhood that existed in handwritten notes to children he never met, in medical equipment that saved lives, in educational opportunities that changed futures. It's the story of a rock star who understood that true legacy isn't about name recognition or inheritance or even being remembered. True legacy is about the lives you touch, the hope you give, and the futures you make possible. Freddie Mercury died without biological heirs, but he left behind thousands of children whose lives were changed by his secret generosity. Children who grew up healthy because of medical equipment he funded. Children who escaped poverty through educational programs he supported. Children who learned to dream because of handwritten notes from a stranger who believed in them. He never wanted to be called their father. He never wanted recognition for what he did. He just wanted them to have futures. And because of his secret generosity, because of that promise he made on live television in the 1980s, because of the millions of pounds he donated anonymously, thousands of children did have futures. That's fatherhood. That's legacy. That's immortality. Not in a name, not in a bloodline, but in every child who grew up believing they mattered because a stranger took the time to write them a note saying, Never stop dreaming. You are the most beautiful song this world will ever hear. That stranger was Freddie Mercury, their distant father, their secret guardian, their nameless friend. And now finally the world knows the truth.